We are live. Oh my gosh, this is happening. Hi everyone, it's Aniyia Williams and
Marco Rogers.
Marco Rogers here for the inaugural episode of Everything She Knows, which is going to be a live webcast discussion with me and some other folks. My first guest is Marco Rogers, who just happens to be my husband, but also is, has over 2 decades of experience in web development, software engineering, engineering management. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of tech. We'll also dive into some talk about startups, about pathways into engineering. And also we can dip in a little bit, talk about what it's like to be married and working in this super fast-paced environment out here in the Valley. I don't know what it's like to survive in San Francisco, what it's like to parent in the startup life, having startup babies and all of that stuff. And whatever else you guys want to hear. I've got my handy dandy iPad here. I'm going to just type hi in there, so I can see what you guys are saying and what questions you might be asking, and I'll be checking this throughout so we can respond to whatever it is that you want to know, your burning questions. Right now, it's looking a little bit empty, and I'm just saying, is anybody out there? Can I get some exclamation points or something in the chat if you're alive and well? Oh, there we go. There's a hello. Did we wear the same color? Yeah, well, I did. He put the red shirt on first, and
she did not tell me what to wear.
I was swagger jacking. That's what happened. Cool. Yes. Oh, Ope thinks we look great. Thanks, Ope. So cool. So we're gonna get into it. I feel like I want to kind of just start by setting the tone. Some of you might be here because you know a little bit about me. Some of you might be here because you know a little bit about Marco. Mostly a lot of people know Marco from Twitter, where he's a bit of a troublemaker, no shit taker. I think some people are a little bit afraid of him. Maybe we'll kind of demystify the Marco a little bit for people.
I hope not afraid. Afraid is not what I'm looking for.
Yeah?
I would look for respect.
Oh, respect. That's kind of a little bit charged, but let's get into that. So I feel this is happening. I have no promises that this is going to be good for our first show, but we'll do our best to make it interesting. And like I said, I'll be keeping an eye on what you guys are sharing and asking us about throughout. So why don't we just get into it? How are you feeling today, Marco?
I'm feeling good.
Are you afraid?
No.
You should be.
No. I love it.
Should be. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your story. I like to kind of start with your first interaction with technology. I think a lot of people think about people who do sophisticated engineering things, and they think that, they had what do they call them? I'm going to really sound like a person that doesn't know anything right now.
Go for it.
The Commodore. So what is it called?
Oh yeah, Commodore 64.
Yeah. See, reaching. I know I'm really reaching.
You're reaching for old computer names.
I know.
We could coordinate on these things.
I really
these are things that we should have talked about.
Yes. Well, so you know what that is now, but you didn't know what that was when you first started learning about technology. So I feel like I would love to hear you share a little bit about your story and how you kind of came into doing what you do today.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's not just because we live in the same house.
You got the plug.
But yeah, I can talk a little bit about where I'm coming from. I usually tell people that I had a pretty traditional trajectory getting into tech and software development. But I feel all I really mean by that is that I went to college, I went to undergrad, and I got a degree in computer science. So I went to Georgia Tech. I'm originally from Georgia, around the Atlanta area, and I went to Georgia Tech. And got a computer science degree. But I think that there's more to that story, what brought me to Georgia Tech, because what's not as traditional about my background is that I didn't really have I didn't really have any familiarity with computers before I went to school, right? I didn't come from a place where there were computers in my house and I was learning games or whatever. I hear that story a lot from people who end up in software. and in tech, but I didn't have any of that, right? Like I came from a more modest family, and I didn't really have anybody around me to introduce me to those things, really.
Okay, hold on, wait. I'm gonna stop you for a second because I'm like, oh, I came from a modest family. Like, we're keeping it real here. Like, I feel like give people a little bit of a taste of like maybe the context of your upbringing. You don't have to like go too far if you don't want to, but I think it's important for people, and I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. Like, I think it's important for you to share a little bit about how you didn't come from a structure of people who were like super ambitious, like engineering, sciencey folks, doctors, and all this stuff, and like cultivated you can fly to the heights of how far you want to fly. Like, that was not necessarily the environment that you grew up with, and yet you were pushed and drawn to these things that were about kind of creating, a better future for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think probably the realest way to put it is, my mom, I grew up in a single parent household, and like my mom was doing well in the community that I came from because she had a really stable job with the federal government. Right. So she got paid decent money. It wasn't great, but she got paid decent money. And it was a salary that we were pretty sure was not going to go away. And like that, I think, was something that not everybody in my community could expect. Right.
Stability.
Yeah. Stability was definitely a big part of it. Whereas, a lot of other people in my family and other parts of the community had these like odd jobs that would go away or things like that. And so stability was not something that we took for granted. And obviously, but when I talk about modest means, I just mean like we didn't have a lot of money, right? Like we weren't in a house that we owned until I was in high school, right? And when I was younger than that, like we would stay with other people, right? Like I remember distinctly that the house that I lived in was not our house. I was living in someone else's house. And so, definitely like when I say more modest background, like I'm talking about all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for giving that color.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think what I talk to people about is that trying to get on a path of wanting to do something really big was difficult. Like I think you can start from a place where those kinds of opportunities are really normal to you because you see them all around you. Like you said, like your parents are in tech, or, my mom was an engineer. Like I get those kind of stories a lot. And I think sometimes, people from that kind of background can take for granted that they were exposed to these things in a way that made them feel accessible. Right. But I didn't even know what was possible growing up.
It's like that. What do they say? You can't be what you can't see type of thing, right? Yeah.
For sure.
So then what was the first like seeing that you saw that kind of got you thinking about that?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of things that I still consider to be really formative. My school, the quality of schools where I grew up was not awesome. And by not awesome, like you pushed me to like be real. I mean like I came from a high school where the principal actually got assaulted and stabbed. Right, like that was like a big.
Have I heard this story?
You have, but I don't think I told the whole story because it's kind of wild, right? Like, but when you're a kid and your neighborhood is already like kind of rough and questionable, like you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, that's a thing that happened. It's not, but like what I can say is that happened, when I was in 9th grade, when I just started high school, and after that I like switched schools, right? So growing up now in hindsight as an adult with like full adult faculties, I'm like, my mom was like, oh no, we out. Like, like I can imagine, like she didn't have that conversation with me.
Yeah.
But I remember it directly after that. It was like, yeah, you're not going to this school anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Got it.
But like outside of that, I actually got enrolled in this summer program, and it was really fantastic. Every summer we would actually it was the same kind of group of kids from that area who had been identified as, gifted or whatever you want to call it. And we would actually go to different places around the country. They would like bus us to different places around the country to be exposed to essentially it was like a STEM program, like, 20 years ago before everybody knew what a STEM program was. Right. And so we got introduced to things like geography and geology studies and like computers and electrical engineering and like a lot of different things to show us that those things were possible, right?
Do you remember what it felt like? Like, do you remember the experience of seeing and being exposed to these things? Like, what your impressions were?
Yeah, I do, and like it's probably gonna be really unsatisfying because one, like I was just young and I didn't know what to care about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there were so many things that happened that I was just like, yeah, whatever, I got to do. It was just like more school,
yeah,
right? But instead of like writing papers, I'm like soldering a circuit board,
yeah,
right? Like, but at the time I was just like, man, why do I have to solder this circuit board? Why do I need to do this, right? Like that. I just had that like snotty kid thing going on, and I'm still upset because I'm like, man, I just like that kid. I'm really annoyed at that kid. But at the same time, it also there were also some other things like because the program was actually in partnership with colleges, so we would actually go to a college in a different state, and like that, I was just like, boom, like I got to go to college because the thing that struck me was the freedom, right? So you get to have your own place. So it's like
very different motivations than like,
yeah,
I'm gonna build computers. You're just like, oh, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I'm going to college.
Word,
college is where it's at.
It was
That's
exactly
where the people
that.
go
I was
to get
like,
out.
Hey, that place is not here, so I'm on it. I'm already sign me up to a place that is not here.
Yeah,
right. And like it's just all of these things kind of come full circle, right? Because I don't hate where I grew up. I just felt like there was more out there and I needed to figure out what it was. And I just didn't it just took a long time before I started to understand where I could go.
Well, you have always talked about how you felt like you didn't fit in.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that played a role?
It's hard to say, right? It's hard to say. I do think what it did do was make me feel like there was nothing that was holding me in place. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've also kind of talked to people who have a hard time like branching out of their community because that's where they feel like they belong. And they're not sure if they belong somewhere else. They're not sure if they're going to feel that belonging somewhere else, or they're not sure how to go forward without that support structure. And I think that's really real. But I think that I really never got super attached to a lot of the community that was around me. Like I always wanted more because like that community, like you said, it always felt like really unstable, right? And I mean, I have a lot of those things today, like stability, like financial stability is like number one.
Oh, right? I know. I know, folks.
So I think part of it is wanting more, but I think part of it is also not feeling those barriers to breaking out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
I feel like if I look at really my trajectory, there's a lot of moments when I could have allowed myself to get blocked and I just never did. I was like, oh, you need me to like drive 10 hours to DC and interview for this job? I'm about to do it. Like I put all my stuff in the car, did a map quest. Map quest was 20 years ago. Yeah. I was like, let's go. I'm gonna be there next week.
I used to have the paper like 50 states atlas.
Yeah, you've always been like a map person.
I love maps.
That was a weird thing when we first met.
GPS has made me soft. So wait, hold on. Let's find, I want to go back though. Okay, so you were in this program. It was really pivotal. It was what got you first introduced to STEM. You didn't get your first computer until you were in high school.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I think that was the other kind of formative experience is that my high school did not have a lot of computers. We had a computer lab, but the only thing I ever got invited into that room to do was practice typing. Like the typing software program. and you have the teacher like walking around seeing if you got home row keys and stuff. And you're typing like quick brown fox or something like that. I don't remember. But I did like learn to type, but the computers weren't for doing things. They were just for like the typing program.
Yeah.
But then in my senior year of high school, something really important happened, which is so I was in an AP calculus class. Like I was on this kind of college bound track. So I was taking AP calculus, and the school had the budget to give one class a set of laptops, and it happened to be my class.
You got lucky.
I was completely lucky. I talk to people about being lucky all the time, and they don't want to hear me. Like literally, if I had been in another class, never gotten a computer, right? And who knows, like literally a completely separate trajectory. But I got this laptop, and it wasn't just, okay, they were like, we're going to use this in class. And so we were using MATLAB and a couple other programs to try to do calculus stuff.
For the non-calculus, I have never had to take more than like algebra 2 because I was a music major in school. Can you explain what MATLAB is for the non-math people in the audience?
MATLAB is really just like, it's just a software program that allows you to take mathematical formulas and put them in a way where you can then work with them interactively, like visualize them, like make graphs and stuff. It's really supposed to make math like actually interactive, right? Rather than just kind of writing formulas and stuff. But it was software, right? And like MATLAB also had a little language in it, right? Like you have to write your formulas in the MATLAB language, if I remember correctly.
So also clearly you were good at math growing up, it seems.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. That's important.
There's definitely like
never good at math.
There's a whole story about how I also got I got designated as gifted really early on.
Yeah.
Right. And when that happens, at least, you know, in the Georgia school system, there's just a completely separate parallel program once you have been identified as gifted. And what that meant for me is that every year when we would talk about my classes, I just got a completely different list of classes. It was like AP classes, gifted English, like, you know, there were just like a set of classes for that a smaller set of kids who have been identified as like going somewhere, you will put on this other track. And even at that time, I knew that was weird, right? Because I mean, this is something that you and I have talked about, how where I grew up, you know, I'm in Atlanta. There's lots of Black people, like, you know, there's always a kind of a significant population of people of color at my school. But when I would go to these gifted classes, that number would drop sharply, right?
Right.
And it's like being on that college-bound gifted track would take you further and further away from everybody that you knew.
So this is really interesting to me, because I feel like one of the things I want to point out is that, you know, to your point, these intersections where like, it was like, I mean, obviously some hard work and preparation and all that stuff, but like luck like played a role, right? In that, one, you were like blessed to have a mother that you were born from who had a stable job working for the government. It seemed pretty legit. We know that your mom has worked that job for over 3 decades before she retired. She's one of the people, by the way, who like actually even retired with a pension, which is a really big deal for anyone nowadays with boomer parents who are like trying to figure out what to do with their lives. Second thing is you got identified as having gifts at an early age. They put you on special tracks where you got special education. And for some reason, our video feed is doing something really strange right now.
I'm gonna entertain y'all while we
guys, I'm sorry about that. Hold on 1 second.
Can they still hear? Is the audio still on?
Yes, you guys can definitely still hear us, and I'm like trying to toggle this video while we're talking. Anyway, so that was one of the things. One of the other things was, okay, here we go. One of the other things there we go. We're back. Okay. Technical difficulties. I am also the production team, guys, so bear with us.
One woman show.
Yes. That's how we do it. Anyway, so like also you got computers in the special class.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so a couple things. One, that pension that my mom has does not exist anymore in the federal government. Like she's like, you know, one of the last years where you could still get that. And now they have like their own version of a 401k. They're like, yeah, save your own money. It'll be fine. Right. And that's happening to literally everybody. I have
a lot of thoughts on that in general. Like one is, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I'm paying attention. There's a question that just came in. But one of those things is basically that I think it's actually ridiculous that people have to like manage their own, what are like the allocations that your 401k is going into. It's just like, people don't understand the nuances of how the stock market works. We're like being forced to gamble with our retirement money. that's a whole diatribe I can go on, but that's taking us away from the story, which is that like you got into high school, you did the computer stuff. You didn't know a lot about computers at that time, but
so there's one more part of this that I think kind of underscores your point.
Yeah.
I got into this summer program that I told you about, right? And I started going to that program in the summer before I went to 8th grade, and it was actually every summer up until I graduated. But I never knew how I got into that program. My mom was like, "Do you want to go to this program?" At first, I was like, "No," because remember I was like a snotty brat, and she was like, "You're going."
Yeah, your mom couldn't get you to like sign up for shit when you were
younger. She was like, "You're going." But it wasn't until later that I kind of found out that I had actually been recommended to the program by a teacher of mine. And like, this is one of my favorite teachers in middle school. She was amazing. And, you know, like I recognized even at that time that, you know, I got special attention from her, like me and other kind of gifted kids and whatnot. But like, I didn't find out until later. Like I went to school to tell her about this program, and she was like, "Yeah, I put you in that program." Right? So like, you have people who are looking out for you and creating these opportunities for you when you don't even know that that's what you need, right? Like, and you know, if they came to me, I was like, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Right? But you got mad people like looking out for you. You got people like trying to make sure that you're headed in the right direction, whether that's what you want to do or not, right? So so like, fast forward, I got these laptops in my senior year, and the important thing was that we used them in the AP calculus class, but we also got to take them home.
Yeah.
Right? They, you know, kind of made a decision, like it was a school thing. They were just like, well, we got these laptops, what are we gonna do with them? Right? And someone like at that moment could have decided, well, these are very precious resources. We have to like take every one and lock them up, right, at the end of the day to make sure they don't get stolen. And instead that worked out, and they were just like, okay, take this home, see if you can figure something out. Right? So I got to take this laptop home, and I tried to get on the internet.
I know, I'm like, here's where my mind is. I know where my mind is going with this. Give a teenage boy a laptop with internet.
Right. So, but like, so here's the thing though. I think even as a teenage boy who wants to get into mischief, you had to figure out how the computer works first.
Yeah.
The thing that I remember is like trying to figure out how to get on the internet.
This is like dial-up America Online.
This is totally America Online. This is AOL something. It might have even been CompuServe. I don't know. But like, I think, you know, this was my senior year in high school, and I want to kind of answer your question about where I started out, because I didn't know anything about it. And I'll give people who are in the know today, I'll give them the story. But basically, what you had to do with dial-up was you went to this program and punched in your password and stuff, and then you hit connect, and then you got that like dial-up noise. I can't make the noise, but everybody,
I know what
everybody like over 30 knows the noise.
Like your computer was about to explode or something.
Right. I don't know if the youngest knows the noise, but everybody over 30 knows the like dial-up connection noise. But I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
And then it would just start to say you're connected, and I was just like, I didn't know. Like, you had to open a web browser. I didn't know that. Nobody told me anything.
You're like, what am I connected to?
So I did that like a dozen times. I was like, it makes this noise and then nothing happens. This is broken. This shit's busted. Right? And eventually I figured it out. I don't know if somebody told me, or I kind of ended up figuring it out myself. But then like you connect over here, and you click the E on Windows, and it opens a web browser.
Internet Explorer.
And then you can do a thing, right? That's how like at the very beginning I was of my tech journey. But over the course of that year with that laptop, I learned how to get on the internet. I learned how to go and find things. I learned what a like URL was, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, at the same time, I'm kind of on this track of trying to get into school. So by the end of that year, I'm like looking at schools, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go do something with this computer. I'm pretty sure if I can figure out how to do something with this computer, I can make some money. Yeah.
It's a good logical leap.
And that was literally the end of my logic. Not like I'm about to build a startup and I'm about to get this VC money. It was just like, I think I can get a paycheck if I can do something with this computer.
Period.
Point blank.
Nice.
So, you know, that kind of led me into college and into, you know, a computer major. I started out computer engineering, switched to computer science, because computer engineering it just didn't click with me. Yeah, I tell people, I was like, computer engineering is more about hardware and circuitry, circuit boards and stuff. And I remember sitting in a class and the professor was like he was really old and he was really slow and he was like he was drawing out this circuit on the board. And you know how they do the squigglies and that's a transistor and there's resistors and stuff. And he was talking about voltages and I was like, I don't care. I really, really don't care. And that's how I knew that I needed to be doing something else. But I also had to take, everybody in engineering track had to take intro to computer science. And I was just like, oh, I can do this. This is cool. So I found that I had an aptitude for it. Yeah. And I kind of continued to pursue it.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of fast forward through college. And Cannon, by the way, said that is so real. And Chad, we're going to get to your question. I'm going to come back to that once we get a little bit more into talking about startups. But is that like, there's also just like one story I want to touch on that I know you've told me before from your college experience, which was like the first time you got in an internet fight with somebody.
Oh, so we're like
talking about Marco's origin story, guys. Are you ready for this?
All the way back. Oh my gosh.
Try
okay. I will tell you this because it definitely still kind of burned in my brain as well. So I'm in college. I find myself like a little bit more savvy about how to kind of be on the internet. Like I know, like Usenet groups from like forums and like different ways of talking to each other, right? Like, AIM chat was definitely a thing at that point. RIP AIM, right? Like, but so you get to start to connect with people.
Yeah.
And you're also at college, so you're also kind of connecting with a bunch of new people in person, and you're kind of thrust into a lot of these different spaces. But I'm like, I'm on this computer engineering / computer science track. And so I also start to get indoctrinated into tech culture, right? There's a whole other story about the first time that I tried to install Linux. And I didn't even know why I wanted to install Linux, but that was just a thing that you did.
Yeah.
If you were a computer person.
Yeah.
Really bad experience with that. But I'm kind of asking people these different questions. So I'm kind of on Usenet groups and whatever. And also they're talking about everything else from like, economics and religion and art and like whatever, right? It's kind of the melting pot of the internet. And so I'm like, I'm out there like, trying to give people my opinions. And I just got into this like really shitty fight with this dude, right? And I think we went through a couple of topics, but then it kind of landed on religion. And I wouldn't call myself a particularly like devout person, but I was raised like Southern Baptist, right? And the church was a really big part of my younger years. And so like I know something about it, right? And this person is talking about it. And I'm like, I don't think you know anything about this, right? So I'm like, we're like going back and forth, and then it like gets heated, right? And today it's just like people are just like, whatever, that's the internet. But at that time, I was like, oh. I was real. Like, you want smoke. You know what I mean? Like, I'm staring at the computer like, oh, okay. Right? Because I'm like, and you can just feel this culture clash right now, right? Because on one hand, I'm trying to like learn how to be this like computer person. But on the other hand, I'm still from where I'm from. Yeah. Where if you talk sideways to people, like, it's going to be a problem. Yeah. Right? And so I'm like typing with this guy, doing way too much. And I'm just like, I bet you won't say that to my face. Right? Like went like that. And he's like, I bet I would. And he told me where his dorm room was.
First mistake.
Okay. Okay. So then you fast forward to me. I'm like, I don't know if y'all like seen that Kevin Hart skit where I go to my friends and I'm like, it's about to go down.
Yes.
Right? And I like put on my jacket. I'm like walking across campus to like find this dude. It's like, it's like 9, 10 o'clock at night. Right. I go, what I'm saying? I go into the dorms, like, you can get into like any of the dorms or whatever. So I walk in on this dude. He's sitting there. He's in his underwear, sitting at his computer. And he looks at me like, what's up? And I'm like, what's up? Right. And he was just like, oh, like, what do you mean? I'm like, what's up? That's what I mean. Right? Like, you want to do it here, you want to go outside, like, you know what I'm saying? It's whatever. Like, you know? And like, he really was confused because he was just like, we were just talking. I thought we were just gonna like sit down and have a Coke and like hash these things out. Right? And I'm like, bro, you about to get your ass kicked. That's what's about to happen.
Oh
like, I need you to catch up before you catch these hands. Like, cause you know what I mean? And he was like legit confused.
Yes.
And I think,
so did you end up having a Coke and?
I did not have
talking
a Coke
about
with this person.
The philosophy of the
I
universe.
did not have a Coke with this person. I decided not to injure him, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the lesson for me was that I was the one that was missing something. Like, this is just how it operates, and like, none of it is supposed to be serious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that has really stuck with me this entire time. I think part of it was me feeling a little bit embarrassed because I didn't understand the culture.
Yeah.
Right. But there was also that other half where I was just like, he doesn't even understand what real life is like. Mm-hmm. He doesn't understand that he almost got his ass kicked. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, there was nothing about his culture that stops him from talking to people like that, because no one's ever punched him in the mouth. Well,
I mean, could that be a solution for a lot of the trolls? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, guys. Okay. So, all right. So we've come through a lot of hurdles here. Like, let's talk about like your first gig out of college. I know I'm skipping past a lot of details, but there's some other stuff we want to get into. So like, I'm going to like skip and fill in some parts that I know, which is that like, when you were graduating with your college degree, it was like .com bust time, right?
Oh yeah,
2001-ish, right?
So 2000 really is when the bottom dropped out of like the first .com boom, right? I didn't understand any of that at the time. I would say that Georgia Tech at that time did not do a good job of really exposing us to the industry. Mm-hmm. I graduated from Georgia Tech in like 2004. I didn't know what kind of job you could get with the degree that I had. And we could talk about that, right? But the bottom had dropped out in 2000. I graduated in 2004. And what I would say is that at that time, it was starting to rebound. Yeah. Because what happened in the mid 2000s is that we like discovered Ajax. We discovered like how to do more sophisticated things on it, like within the browser, that enabled like this explosion of more interactive apps. Yeah. Because before that, it was still just like mostly flat web pages and forms and stuff like that. And you could still make applications, but it just wasn't as sophisticated. But with the introduction of Ajax as a way to do more sophisticated client-side stuff delivered through the web, there was like a re-explosion of that stuff, and that was coming back
for like web-based software, basically.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah,
and so so basically, like, you know, I remember you telling me that your professors were all like, "Sorry, guys, you guys decided to major in computer science, and you might not have a job."
They told me that. That was the atmosphere, right, in the early 2000s. It's like, oh, you're doing that computer thing. It's not looking good. I think we tried that, and I think it's not really working out, right? Like, you may want to think about doing something else. And you know, it's important to kind of understand this is in the context of like what you're going to do with the rest of your life, right? Like, you're giving this institution tens of thousands of dollars to put you on a path to be able to have a career, and they're just like, you picked the wrong one. Sorry. You know, and like, it's wild. It's really wild. I didn't know how to react to that. I don't like, you know, if you think about like a young, you know, 20-something person who's in college, like I'm still much more kind of worried about my college experience. I haven't really gotten serious about where the rest of my life is going. I'm just like, well, that's kind of shitty, but I don't know what to do about that. So I'm just gonna, I don't know.
See it
right?
through.
I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna keep doing this until I figure something else out.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I feel like you probably at least knew that there was value in having a degree, like, period. Sure. Right. Okay. So then like you graduate and you're like, okay, now what?
I was not a good student. You've heard this. I think you were like really surprised when I told you.
How real do you want to keep it?
Because I'm
for the record, like, in our relationship, I'm definitely like the gold star overachiever. I just want to do a good job person and get all A's. And like this one's like, fuck your rules, whatever, I did it. Like, what's the minimum I need to do to get the thing? Okay, fine. I mean, you're not like that now, but that was definitely like,
I kind of am like that. But I was like, I heard you. I think I understand. I don't want to do any of this homework, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, can we negotiate some other thing that I can do? Because I'm not going to be here. Like, I was also really bad with attendance. I almost like I had a trouble graduating.
I'm judging you.
I have trouble graduating college because I didn't show up to class. And you know how some professors have that thing where they're like, you can have 5 missed classes, and after that you fail. Yeah. I'm like, I was on that 5. I was on the 5th one, and I had a chemistry class, and the class was in the middle of the day, but there was a lab. You know, you have a lab that you got to show up to, and that was at 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like running across campus at 8:05 so I don't like miss, you know, my last thing to like be able to pass this class. And like I'm that student, right? At the same time, I'm absorbing all the material, I'm learning things. I've just never been good at the process, like doing the thing that people expect, like falling in line, like showing up to do the thing. I've just never been good at that. I'm still bad at it. I'm late to literally every meeting. Right at work. I walk in and I'm like, it's 2:05. I'm like, sorry, I'm late, y'all. Like that's just everybody. I mean,
actually, like this is true. Obviously, I can confirm like a good bit of it, even though I've never worked with you, but I know how you show up in real life. And mostly I have just gotten accustomed to I feel like honestly, like there's a really good kind of like yin and yang thing that we got going on. We're like 2 very different people, but like I don't know, like I think when you first met me, like, so we've been together for what, 12 years now? Mm-hmm. Over a decade. Yeah. And I feel like when you first met me, I was like, obviously like very anal, but super uptight, like, and very like, oh my God, like the plans had to go according to plan.
The word we use today is that she's very particular. Okay? That's the word we use
today. That's like the very nice husband thing to say. I love it. But I feel like you helped me kind of like loosen up my grip so much on life where I just like had to control so much of it. And
you've always been a person who was really an overachiever, but very high performing. Like I think even early on, I
take pride in that.
Like, man, she could do so much. I don't even know how she does so much. But I think what I would say is that what I was learning about you is that when it didn't work out, like when you had this plan and you had executed and worked so hard and it still didn't work out, that you would take it super hard.
Yeah, I still kind of do a little bit.
You would take it super hard. And I think I was surprised by that. And I think, you know, it was my role to kind of try to be supportive, but it was a very different, just a very different way of being than I was used to, who was just like, I don't know, whatever, things don't work out, it's fine. You know, and
I mean, that's proven to be true for you. So like, clearly there's 2 ways to go about life here and arrive at a place that, you know, people might define as successful. Do you think of yourself as successful?
I do. Today I do. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm kind of comfortable like sitting in that label. But I've come to accept that I would call myself successful or it definitely makes sense if other people view me as successful. Yeah.
Okay. You're like, I'll accept it. All right. So like, I just want to talk about how you got your first job. And then I want to skip to like modern times. 'Cause you know, people got dinner to eat and shit. Go ahead.
Okay. Word. Yeah. So my first job, what I usually say about this is that, this is where, when I talk to people about having a network, having connections and being really lucky, I talk about how I got my first job. So, cause I graduated from school. I did not have a strong GPA at all. And I did not know how to look for a job. Right. You know what, like if you have people around you who are, successful professionals, they will help you understand what is expected to go out into the professional world. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like this is kind of, it's really an important point to make. people who have those advantages don't see them as advantages. That's just a thing that happens to you, right? If your parents are professional, they will tell you how to be professional. If your parents do not have those professional jobs, they don't know anything. They don't know how to help you with anything. And I remember having this conversation with my mom when I graduated high school, where she was just like, this is what I needed to do. I needed to get you through high school, and if at all possible, get you into college. I can't help you with anything else. I do not know where you're going. I have no idea about the world that you are stepping into. And I didn't have anybody else to help me, right? And I could tell a lot of stories about how, like, what that was like for me, not having any like real mentors or network or someone kind of looking out for me like I did when I was in school, when I was in middle and high school. But anyway, so I was kind of just floundering around. I wasn't getting any callbacks for applying to jobs in Atlanta. And out of the blue, a buddy of mine called me up. This is a person that is still a really good friend of mine. We had roomed together my freshman year and just became really good friends. He had left the school early, like he went to a different school. And so we had kind of like kept in touch, but like, I didn't know if I was really ever gonna see him again. But he called me up and he was just like, yeah, I'm over here. I'm out here in DC. I'm working. They told me that they're looking for people, and I thought of you. Like, I'm gonna, I want you to call this person back.
Yes,
right?
Luck strikes again.
Yeah, like word, right? And like I've said this before, and people like, how did you get your start? And I always have different answers, but like in a lot of ways, it was just like know the right white person. Right? Like I knew the right white person, and he called me at the right time and was like, I'm gonna give you this opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like when you're casting about and putting in your resume and like trying to get anything popping, you waiting for people to call you back. Right. And that's where I was. Like if I had stayed in that place, like no one would ever heard of me. And instead, I knew the right person, and they decided to call me. Yeah. And they put their name behind mine and was like, if you're looking for people, you need to talk to this person, And so then, that got me the call back. I still had to go through the interview. I still had to, I had phone interviews. I had a technical screen, like he was asking me questions about what I knew. And like I was trying to answer them to the best of my ability.
Okay,
right?
wait. So how different was this technical interview, which I know it was a long time ago, but like if you think about what the experience was like with that interview and then like what you see now in like startop world.
Okay. It was a long time ago. I remember
Compare and contrast,
I remember it
roughly.
vividly.
Yeah, okay.
Because like it's kind of, I think it's kind of sad when I think about it today. But like, I didn't have any interviews. Like I couldn't get an interview. Yeah. This was my one and only interview where I got called back.
Good thing it worked out.
I just happened to get it right. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't even know if I got everything right, but I do remember a couple things. And it was all over the phone. And this was the person who was actually like, it was a small contracting firm, right? So I was going to go and be a developer at this contracting firm. But the person I talked to was the person who started it. It was the founder. They didn't use founder. He was just like the president or whatever, right? But he called me and he just asked me questions. And I remember them being really simplistic. He was just like, so in your resume, it says that you do Java. I was like, yeah. And he was like, does that include JavaScript? Like he literally said that. Yeah. And it had to be a trick question.
I was gonna say, isn't that a trick question? Because even I know that those are not the same thing. And I was just like,
well, those aren't the same thing, but I have like done a little bit of JavaScript, right? Yeah. And I feel like if I had been like, oh yeah, bet, like I do all the Javas, like I'd have been out of there. Yeah, but the fact that I knew that they were not the same thing. Yes. It's like, oh, okay, you were not a complete idiot. Yeah. Maybe, And then like I had this short phone call and then he was like, okay, we need to have another conversation, but I need you to come up here and do it in person. Like, if you could be in DC, I will, you'll have another conversation with me and maybe we'll put you to work. And that's what I mean. Like that was the moment where I was just like, I could decide that I wasn't ready to do that, or I could like throw all my stuff in a truck and like get on the road, which is what I did.
And jump on that train. Okay, so we have two things that people have said that I want to like get at you on. So like Cannon was saying, like, know the right person or white people. but then you need to abide by the rules with a slightly frowny face. Which seems a little bit also related to this question that Ope asked. Do you think that being the gifted kid and therefore having comfort with being one of the only Black ones in white spaces as a young person has impacted your ability to survive or thrive in tech? So questions about navigating predominantly white spaces or
I would, we could spend a long time on that, but I would say yes, right? It's a lot. I think it has taken me a long time to understand like really how to think about it and what it means to like be a person who can move in white spaces versus not being really comfortable with that. I wouldn't say I started out comfortable. What I would say is that I kept pushing because that's the place that I wanted to go. And so I learned how to adapt myself. And it wasn't until later that I realized that that's what it was that I was doing, is learning how to like follow white people rules. That's not what they call it, right? Obviously. You know what I mean? But it wasn't until later. And I think it's important because that's why this movement is important, because it gives people that language to understand what is happening. That's just not how I thought about it, right? And I think, if you got people in the chat and they're thinking like, man, like, why, I wouldn't want to do that, right? I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just didn't know that's what was happening.
So what would be your advice to people like now who are just coming in trying to like cut their teeth and get a break, like assimilate or no, like bring your whole self, or like, tamping it down a little bit? Like what's the move? Do you pander and try to just fit in so that you can get your bag, or do you just stay like unapologetically true to yourself and say fuck it, whatever happens happens?
I think it's really hard for me to answer that question for other people. Like I don't know what anybody else's situation is, and I don't know what's going to provide them with that right balance between that like that financial stability, which I got instilled in me as a really important thing early on, right? So I'm going to weight that really heavily, versus like that sense of self, right? That sense of like, being who you are rather than trying to conform to what someone else needs you to be. There are people who are going to value that much more highly, even if it means that they can't really get the opportunities that they would otherwise want to have. And they're going to make that trade-off in a different direction.
Thanks, John.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm not going to tell people what to do. What I will say is that I will say two things in response to that. One, I would say that environment that I'm talking about is still the environment that we live in. Like most of the time, if you want to go far in a professional environment, you have to learn to move in white spaces. We haven't solved that problem. We're talking about the problem. That wasn't true 20 years ago. That's the thing that has changed, is that we're talking about it, that people have heard it, that we're trying to bring people in to engage with that question. And I think we can make progress over time, but largely that's still the case. So it is going to be a thing that is a decision that's put in front of a lot of people of color. At the same time, the second thing that I would say though is,
God damn it, this fucking thing. Sorry, the camera cut off again. Keep going. They can still hear us.
Oh, okay. If you can still hear me, the second thing that I would really say though is that I think I'm very aware also that I come from a particular generation where when I started, there was nobody who looked like me in tech. And now there's actually a lot more. So we've made progress. And I don't want anybody who's starting out today to feel constrained in the way that I was. I'm not going to tell you to do it like how I did it, because what I want is for the situation to be different. What I want is for us to make progress to a place where you don't have to make the sacrifices that I feel that I had to make. What should they do? I'm like, well, I mean, if you find yourself in my situation, if you feel like you can't change it, maybe you need to do some of that code switching. Maybe you need to learn how to be adaptable, right? But if you can ask for something different, do that. And I'm going to be behind you on that 100%. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to that thing where it's like, you got to survive, you got to like get paid. And there's a lot of questions that do come up in conversations and spaces that I'm in all the time, where people are basically trying to navigate that same that same thing. And they're also wondering like if they're selling out, you know, in a way. And like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a very complicated question. I think it very much depends on the person. And I think that like the reality of it is like, regardless of how you feel about white supremacy and privilege and all of that stuff, like most of the people who have the resources and the ability to make your thing happen or not happen are white people. And like, as it goes with people in general, like they need to feel comfortable and trust you to some degree in order to engage with you, to do business with you, to hire you, and all of these things. And so I do think it's a little bit of a dance. I think that a lot of us are also trying to figure out how you play within the system so that you can have what you need to eat. Like everybody's got to eat. But also actively try to dismantle the system or build a new system. And I think that's a very important conversation that's happening right now that I'm sure that Del and I will get into when we talk next week. And I'm like, damn, we got 10 minutes left and we didn't even get to like half of the shit. I told you this was
gonna go fast, didn't I?
I know, but like you were like telling all these good stories and it was good. So I guess I'm gonna have to like have you back on. You know where to find me. We're in our house right now. So
I have to check my schedule.
Yeah.
I'm available.
Negro. Okay, so why don't we at least spend the last 10 minutes? I want to like talk about like Twitter etiquette for a minute. I want to talk about like where you're at. Like how should people meet you on Twitter? Like how do you not get a Marco smackdown when you like literally are like curious and want to engage and kind of want to like pick your brain for those golden nuggets of wisdom?
I don't know how to answer this question. I know why you're asking it.
It's definitely a trick question.
I know why you're asking it.
Yeah.
Like I definitely am. I would say known for being dismissive and being kind of gruff with people and like, you know, telling people to fuck off. Like I do that.
Why do you do that?
I do that because it's important for me to, like, I have to like when you pass a certain threshold of followers, Twitter has this this phenomenon where they're going to keep putting your words in front of other people and letting them react however they want, and they can say whatever the hell they want to you. And like, I think what I kind of remind people all the time is that that's just not how life works. Like, you don't just roll up to someone's table at a restaurant while they're eating and be like, I heard what you said. Let me tell you what I think about it. You don't do that shit. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even want to do that in person. And yet somehow Twitter makes you want to do that to people. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculous. Right? There was a point when I realized that was ridiculous. Yeah. And then it became important for me to create these boundaries so that if I was going to stay on Twitter and I was going to continue to talk about things that people tell me that they want to hear, that I have to create these barriers for myself so that I don't burn out. So I don't just have randos like trying to like push their thoughts and random opinions into my attention all the time. Yeah. So right? Boundaries. It's just all about boundaries, right? Like, and I don't want to be I had to go through a process of understanding who I wanted to be, because I don't want to be seen as a person who's an asshole. Like, I'm not going to treat everybody like that. Yeah. But if the way you engage with me tells me that you're not here to talk to me, that you're just doing that internet thing where you have a difference of opinion and you want to tell me about it because you're in your feelings, like, we can skip that. Yeah. We can skip that. You can do that by yourself. You don't need me for that. So, like, one, clearly you are never taking responsibility for other people's feelings on this thing. And I would say, like, you're not an asshole. You are like a grumpy old man, though. But yeah, since you can live, be me. If somebody comes at your neck, like, you can hurt some people's feelings. Since we're live, like, and you know me best, you can tell people, at least who are on the cast, like, am I like this in person? Like, I don't like bullshit in person either. Like, I'm not. It's not just a Twitter role that I play. Like, I'm just like, okay, I don't want to talk about. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about you though is that, like, it depends on how you are interpreting, like, how people are coming at you though too, which is like true for people in general. But I feel like you definitely have like I think when comparing myself to you, I feel like I will do a little bit more to be like,
before I make a decision about like what this person is trying to do, like, let me ask a couple more probing questions so that I feel really confident in my response before I like rip your neck off. But like, you're just like, fuck it, I don't have time to like even cut through the mustard. Like, I don't like the way you're doing this, and now I'm just going to chop you down and like move the fuck on. Like, you just like roll, like you can just barrel through people, and I'm just like, I feel too bad doing that. I'm too nice.
I wouldn't call myself mean. I mean, I'm just not gonna let everybody take up my time if it's not something that I want to participate in. And I think that's really what I end up talking about a lot, is that Twitter has made people feel like my job is to talk to them. Right.
Well, you have a big following.
That's what I mean.
Like
I'm a, like, you know, people start to talk about like, you have a platform, you're like a public figure. Like, no, I'm just like some guy. Yeah. I'm just like some guy. I have a regular ass job, and sometimes I take a break from that job and I get on Twitter.
Okay, so
I'm not here to entertain you. This is not like a television show.
So how did your following get so big? Like, actually, I don't even know the answer to that question. I mean, obviously through tweeting.
You do. I think you've heard a lot of the story, right? So I used to talk about tech a lot. Yeah. You know, and I would get like a couple thousand followers just because I was really active in like tech circles. Like, I was already kind of doing conferences, and, you know, I had a lot of friends in open source communities and things like that. So Twitter was a place where I got to talk about tech with other people who were kind of in other places. But there were a couple of really formative things. And what I would say is that it was really what went down in Ferguson. Right.
Okay.
Because I hadn't really found my voice, but I was dipping my toe into kind of talking about certain things that had to do with social justice and things like that. But then what happened is, like, and I'm talking about like when it was actually happening.
Yeah.
Right. So Mike Brown was killed, and I was like, that's really messed up. And I was talking about how it was really messed up. But then the protests started happening. And on Twitter, what I started to see was people who were on the ground in Ferguson saying, the cops are showing up. They are not playing. Like, they are trying to hurt people out here. We're trying to peacefully protest. And I was just like, I'm looking around, I'm looking for news, right? I'm looking at the expected public channels for news to talk about what is happening in Ferguson, and they were just not doing it. Mm-hmm. Nobody was talking about it. And there was a moment when I realized that, like, I'm getting it directly from people who are on the ground, and I believe them. Mm-hmm. I believe that shit is going down and no one's talking about it. So I started talking about it. I was never there, right? And I want to be super clear. I was never there. I just had entered a community of a bunch of people who were actually active there. And I started to talk about it, and I started to retweet it. And at some point, I became a person who people were finding to try to get news about what was happening in Ferguson, right? And then my follower count started to blow up. And it was like a combination of kind of being one of those conduits for that real information, and also continuing to talk about it in context, right? Like, let's talk about social justice. Let's talk about why, you know, white supremacy is still a thing. Let's talk about, you know, and I found my voice in that moment to be able to talk about these things. And I think that it has kind of just continued from there. Yeah. Once that, you know, that floodgate opens and you're like, we have to talk about this. And Twitter was a place where I could talk about it, but like in bits and pieces as I kind of formed my thoughts. And like, you know, it was like a commitment that I could make to show up every day and try to have a few more thoughts about it. And that just has continued to kind of grow from there, I would say. But it was really Ferguson. That's really what it was. And it was other people found me, but it was also when I understood the real power of Twitter. Like, I was getting real information about something very important that was happening. And the news where people expect to get the truth was not talking about it at all.
Okay, so before we go, what's one thing you love about Twitter?
You know, this is like the worst moment to ask me that question.
I'm like, is it the story you just told? Like, the power.
I'm really down on Twitter these days, right? But I think I do love that it is a place where you can kind of try out your thoughts, and people who those thoughts resonate with can kind of find you and decide to form community with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's lots of different places to form community, right? But Twitter, I think, allows it to be a place where you can kind of go at your own pace rather than feeling like you're on a stage or feeling like you kind of have to be performative about it. Like you can leave your own thoughts in whatever way and whatever quantity and however often you want. And people get to opt in. Like they get to decide if they're going along on this journey with you. And it's not like because like what I get like as kind of an alternative is like people are like, why don't you write a blog post for me? And I'm like, that's homework. Like, don't give me homework.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If I'm going to do a thing, it's because I want to do it, not because like people are expecting it.
That's
right. So anyway, I just think Twitter is the platform that I have chosen to be able to expand on a lot of my other thoughts, because like my regular life is just like, I got work to do, right? I come home and help take care of this baby. Like it's normal as hell, but I have all the other things that I care about, and I have to find a way to engage with those things and express those things. And I think Twitter just does a good job at that.
Wow. Okay. I also want to make sure I get to this question before we go, which is going to be a little bit of a pivot. How do you think your way through the concept of ethical consumption in tech today? There seems to be a lot of pressure on individuals to boycott working for Google or not use Amazon in their products and so on. So how can we start to really think about our citizenship, like being a good citizen, a good person, alongside all of what we know is problematic about tech?
I would actually be much more interested in hearing your answer to this, because I think that
I have a lot of thoughts on it.
You spent way more time really thinking about and working on the ethics of these things. For me, I'm like from a consumer perspective, right? I just kind of try to do what I can, right? Like the hard thing, and we didn't even get to talk about a lot of this stuff, but when you are, working as a full-time professional, or you have multiple jobs and you're just trying to make ends meet, technology is about convenience. It's about saving you time and money. And people just don't have the luxury of saying, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
They just don't, right? And I think if we're going to change this system, it can't be about telling people you have to spend more of your time and money, because that's the only way that you're going to show that you care. Like, that's a non-starter to me, right? But I do think as a technologist, we can and should care much, much more. In this moment, we actually are fortunate enough to be in really high demand, which means we have leverage. Like I can decide that I am not going to work at Amazon and help them build a thing that spies on everybody. I can make that choice because I can get a different job. There are other jobs for me to have. If I was in an industry that did not have that kind of demand, it would be a different thing. Like I might have to make a different choice, and that goes back to what we're saying. Like everybody got to eat.
Yeah.
Like if you're worried about eating, like do what you got to do.
Yeah. And there are some people where like maybe Amazon's the only callback they got for a job, and so here they are, even though they might not agree with it. Like it is definitely not a like a binary, like a black or white type of issue. And I think like, for me, it's really just taking it one thing at a time. Like I really do not condone a lot of the business practices of a company like Amazon, but do Amazon boxes show up at my house? Yes. Like, are some of my favorite things running on AWS? Am I like going to never watch Netflix or do Pinterest or any of those things? Like, I think that that's really, really hard. And to your point, it has us grappling with like, ease and cost of what it is to run our lives today. Like, I think from a high level, when we think about just all of what it takes to show up and do the things that you're supposed to do, to like get out of bed, to go to work, to take care of your kids, to do all of these things. Like there's just way too much fucking stuff that we are like expected to do and deliver on a daily basis. And part of the lore and why I think there's been such a rise in technology and our usage of it is because it has streamlined and made a lot of these things more efficient. It's made us more productive. And I think that has been a double-edged sword. But I really do think that we need to start having more conversations about like what role technology plays in our lives, like what feels like the morally acceptable options that we have around us. Because the other thing about it, like if we're keeping it 1 milli, is that like the people who are in charge of these technology companies more often than not are also making choices, right? Like they are optimizing at the end of the day for their shareholders. And fuck this camera, but I'm going to wrap it up with this last comment and say that, like, you know, they're trying to optimize things for their shareholders. They understand that like these are sometimes morally corrupt decisions that they are making, and yet we have not been playing a role to hold them accountable, to make different decisions. And I think that that only starts with change through what we are doing and what we are expecting and how we are coming to them and how we are incentivizing them to make those changes. So I absolutely want to talk more about that as well, which I will next week with Del Medina when we're back. Our time is up for the day. We're over by a few minutes, but thank you guys for joining us on this live web discussion. I'm sorry that you can't see me right now, but we will be back next Tuesday at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, with my homegirl partner, Del Medina. We're going to be tackling capitalism, or at least as much of it can be tackled in an hour. So you can start sending your questions to me on Twitter or drop them in the Crowdcast room. Marco, thank you so much for being my guest. I'm going to have to bring him back probably in a couple episodes so that we can actually get to the other shit we didn't even talk about. I wanted to learn more about, like, you know, your transition between engineer to manager and all of these other things. Like there's so much, you're just a font of knowledge. And we didn't even get into parenting.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a good time.
And all that stuff. Yes. But I really appreciate you. And thank you guys for joining us. And I'll work out some of these technical kinks for next time. Thanks for being my guinea pigs.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Appreciate you.